Welcome back, or welcome to the Level Up Health Education Podcast. My name is Jeff Bartlett, and I'm here to help you level up your teaching. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. I was initially going to post this episode last week, but decided not to in order to spend a little bit more time just relaxing. So we are back with another question submitted by a health educator. And this week's question comes from Brent. Hello, Brent. We met at SHAPE, I believe, last year in Baltimore. And Brent wrote in, he's looking for engaging learning activities in the classroom for each skill standard. It's very difficult to keep students' interest because many don't want to talk to anyone but their friends. I can create learning targets and goals, but struggle with the activities to engage them and get closer to learning the skill. As always, this is a great question. I've had a lot of great questions submitted so far, and I want to start by talking about what engagement means and what it is and what it isn't, and then how we can change how we think about engagement and use that to create more meaningful activities for the students within our classes. So first, I want to pose two different lessons to you, just as a thought exercise. This first one, actually both of them are around the topic area of nutrition and healthy eating. In this first lesson, the teacher shows a colorful slideshow about the different food groups. There might be a short video about what healthy eating looks like, whatever that means. And there's a worksheet, and students are supposed to match food to food groups or color in a MyPlate diagram and things like that. And then we have a second lesson here, again, also about nutrition and healthy eating, where the teacher gives students a scenario. They say that there's a student athlete who says they feel tired all the time, but they believe that they eat, quote, healthy. And here's what they ate yesterday. And they give students a sample food log with meals and snacks and beverages that the student athlete had the previous day, and gives them guiding questions and pairs the students up and asks them to analyze the food log, identify patterns based on their knowledge, and then make a list of changes that could improve the student athlete's energy levels. So if we look at these two examples, the question then is, which one is engaging? So if we go back to the first lesson, right, with the teacher, there's a slideshow and the video and the worksheet and things like that. And so students they're watching, they are coloring, right? They are answering questions, most likely directly from slide decks or posters, and it appears to be engaging, right? Because students have visuals to look at. They are, quote, busy or on task, right? But cognitively, from an engagement perspective, there's little to no thinking involved in this task because these tasks rely on students to recall or copy and not necessarily understand the information. And they can complete this work without going into that deeper level. There's really no productive struggle here. So if we were to gauge this on a scale of what mental effort is required, it'd be pretty low because they can do this without necessarily learning anything new. But if we go to our second scenario, we have students who are working together, right? They have to apply their knowledge of nutrition that they theoretically have learned in previous lessons. They have to justify and provide support and reasoning for their answers. If they are working in groups, they might come to a disagreement with their group members. They have to justify and explain their thinking. So we have productive struggle here too. So if we were to rank this on a mental effort level, it would be a little bit higher because students are thinking, evaluating, and connecting ideas. So I bring this up because there are some activities that look engaging. Students are busy. There's busy work. There's a focus on completing something. Maybe the right answers are obvious, but ultimately the cognitive demand is pretty low. Whereas if we go to something that is a truly engaging activity, students are thinking, there's a focus on reasoning, they have to justify their answers, and that cognitive demand is a little bit higher. Now, I start with those two examples because the definition that you use to define engagement ultimately determines whether or not you think students are engaged. And it's easy to go online and find tons of resources that people say are engaging. And if you go on any social media group, Health Teacher Central on Facebook, for example, people are always looking for, quote, engaging activities. And a lot of times, understandably, teachers just want to keep students out of trouble in the classroom and focus on doing something, right? If an administrator walks in, it looks good, different things like that. And sometimes teachers don't know how to create truly engaging activities. And that is a real challenge, right? So today, I want to start off by using a definition. This is from three individuals, Fredericks, Blumenfeld, and Paris in 2004, and they define engagement as the mental effort students invest in understanding and constructing meaning. Now, if we use this as our definition of engagement in order to create truly engaging activities, then yes, we have to make sure that students are actually thinking. So to go back to how Brent wrote his question, he said he knows how to create learning targets and goals, right? So he's already done the hard part, right? Being able to figure out what I want students to do and demonstrate and know. If you can do that, then you're already on your way to creating engaging activities. But I want to go over a couple other definitions here too. So if we come back to our definition from UDL, now some of you may have used UDL in different professional development sessions. It is universal design for learning. Our district used that for a little bit, and I guess in some ways we're still using it. But if UDL, what they say, they talk about the why engagement, and they say, quote, in reality, there is not one means of engagement that will be optimal for all learners in all contexts. Multiple options for engagement are essential. And they have different 13 considerations on their website, and I'll link to that in the show notes. And these are in three main categories. And these are categories about welcoming interests and identities, which focus on honoring learners' whole selves, on sustaining effort and persistence. And this refers to tackling challenges with focus and determination. And then emotional capacity, which is when students can harness the power of emotions and motivation in their learning. So when you see this, I don't want you to flip out and think you need to create 7 different versions of all your activities, right? We know that from psychology and research that learning styles are actually a myth, right? It's a learning preference. And that's a whole other episode for a different day. But if we come back to this definition, right? And the UDL website has a great set of resources about what all considerations mean. We're really just focusing on welcoming students to the learning when they get there, keeping them there and showing them that effort and persistence is important, and then using that to continue to motivate students as well. Another consideration in creating engaging activities comes from John Safier and the Skillful Teacher. If you have an opportunity to take the Skillful Teacher course, I highly recommend it. In our district, all teachers within their first 2 years in our district are mandated to take that course, and they cover it for us. And it's probably the best professional development I've ever taken a part in. And that was in my first year of teaching, and I still look back on that book and that binder when I need to. And what they mention is that attention is connected to different parts of their Skillful Teacher framework, specifically your classroom routines, your clarity with learning, having measurable objectives, and the class climate that you create, which includes developing a community of learning and how you're supporting students, as well as how you build personal relationships. And they note that all of these components need to be active, present, and functioning. And that's a quote from the video and the show notes that I'll link to you in each classroom, even if it's only behind the scenes. And so if we are truly creating engaging activities, we have to make sure we're doing all of this first. They also mentioned that it's important to send 3 messages to students in order to keep them engaged and interested in your class and your curriculum. And those 3 messages are, this is important, you can do it, and I won't give up on you. Again, I highly recommend the Skillful Teacher. They have a lot of resources on their website and some good videos on YouTube. But again, if we're doing all of those things to lay the groundwork, we're already on our way to creating engaging activities. Something else to consider from the Skillful Teacher resource would be how we teach our students effective effort. And that, again, could be a whole other podcast for a separate day, and maybe it will be. But that's something to keep in mind too. Another resource that I've stumbled upon recently is a teacher named Brooke McKinney, and I started to follow her on LinkedIn. She goes under the handle The Engaging Teacher, and a quote of hers really stuck out to me in that engagement isn't entertainment, it's ownership. Right. And so that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how when people see engaging activities, they think it's just all this busy stuff. But in reality, it's students taking that ownership of the learning. And I'll put the link in the show notes, but she focuses on 5 different things and how to engage students. And these include different things like making the task feel real and not performative. So it should be like an authentic task. It doesn't have to be flashy and loud or quote fun, right? It's students wanting to figure something out or arguing with something and different things like that. Additionally, and we'll connect this to health class in a minute or later on, we want to give students something, not just to answer, but to create something, right? So that carries over well in the skills-based health ed. She has some great tips on her website about making that task feel real and not performative. And this is from an infographic that she created. And ultimately, there are 3 things that carry really well over into skills-based health ed. She talks about using assignments with real audiences. So this is something that we've started to really focus on in my middle school with my colleague Noel. We are trying to create assignments that we challenge students by saying, hey, we're going to, for example, share the best ones with our superintendent and our principal. Or when you create this project, we are going to have each class select what they think is the one that best represents the task. And we are going to share that with administrators. Or we are going to, for the restaurant they created for your nutrition project, we're going to pick the best one and have a pretend advertisement created for it on Hawks News, which is our student-run news channel. Something else that Brooke talks about is choosing formats that matter, and these could be things like for advocacy using podcasts, or for something like decision making, right? Writing out, a script and a short story or different things like that. And then her third key is to connect things to real world experiences. And this is very easy to do in health education class. And we have it easier in a lot of ways in a lot of subjects to do that. So those are 3 tips to think about as well. Now, I also want to bring your attention to Holly and Sarah's book. So, Sarah Bennis and Holly Alpern's second edition of the Essentials of Teaching Health Education book. I don't have the third edition, or am I mixing my books up? Anyway, I have the second edition in front of me, but they have a lot of information on page 28 and into 29 about participatory methods. So one of our 3 key components of a skills-based health ed curriculum is using participatory methods. And we want to move beyond, as they say, having students do activities just to do them, right? So these are based on things like learning theory and allow students to be in the driver's seat in demonstrating and showcasing their ability to perform skills and improve their health literacy. So they have a couple different bullet points, everything from asking students what topics they're interested in, to differentiating options, to having them design the actual activities. Another thing to keep in mind too is ask your students for feedback. And they mentioned this in their book as well. This allows them voice and choice, but I think a lot of times we do things and think that it might appear to be something our students are really interested in, but at the end of the day, it may not be. So again, if you look at one of our core components of a skills-based health ed program, right, we want these student-centered, interactive, and experiential, and that's a quote from the Centers for Disease Control, activities. And so you look at different things like debates and problem solving and role plays and all sorts of things, podcasts, advocacy, PSAs, infographics, all of these things. So we also want to keep in mind that we can have these activities occur in a social context. Again, this is from Holly and Sarah's book as well. We know that students are influenced by a variety of pressures and people around them. So if they can work socially, it's probably going to be more engaging to them too. So now, what can this look like in your health ed classroom? Well, here's some ideas based on what I do. And here's the disclaimer that what I do is by no means perfect. It is not the only way of doing things, but it's based on my own experiences and the needs of my students. Starting off for each standard, making sure that you have your skill cues and your objectives and your performance indicators all selected, all narrowed down, all tightened up. If you're using a rubric or a checklist, that is important too. And then make sure that you can connect those to the lives of your students by making it relevant to them, right? Relevancy is one way to increase engagement and interest in what we're doing. Some things that have worked well for me are using a progression. Well, first, using a progression of skill practice. So typically, the first time we practice a skill, it's either as a whole class or in small groups, right? This includes that social context that Holly and Sarah talked about. It also allows students to feel a little bit less, less nervous about doing things correctly and hearing that other people are making mistakes just like them. And then we shift to even smaller groups or maybe pairs right before students are doing it individually. That's one way. So hopefully, in theory, by the time we get to the individual skill practice, students have already bought in and they know what to do and things like that. Another idea that I had done with my former colleague Danielle Larocque, and we have continued, and future colleagues after her, is using challenges. So, for example, we have a challenge we use with our decision-making unit when we break students up into groups and we put scenarios on the board and they have to walk through our decision-making process. And we have a grid on the board and we keep track of which groups with a check or an X get each step. And that allows me to do some reteaching. It's a little competitive, so that gets students into it as well. When we do something with nutrition in grade 6 with food groups, right? We have a food group challenge and students have to work together as well. So different things like that have worked for me. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think engaging comes back to, again, that first definition that I shared at the start of the podcast and thinking about the mental effort that students are investing. It doesn't mean that we have to make things super challenging. We just have to give students the work and have them do it. And that is one reason why, if we come back to the skillful teacher, we need to also teach our students effective effort. This one felt a little bit rambling to me, so hopefully it provides you with some good insight and some good info. I'm going to think through this a little bit more, and I'm sure that I'll have more to share as we move on. But thank you, as always, for so many questions. And Brent, this was a good one. I enjoyed digging back into some resources to refresh my memory on this too. If you have a question, please submit it. I am running low on questions, actually. Although I have the next bunch of episodes planned out, I'd like to get some more. And as always, thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Level Up Health Education Podcast. My name is Jeff Bartlett, and if you like this, please share it with your favorite health educators. Please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. I also have a free newsletter, the Level Up Health Education newsletter, and you can find a link to subscribe in the show notes. And as always, thanks for your support.